standing on the shore of the Dead Sea, and there was a whole lot of people standing there, and we were watching a storm out on the sea and a ship, and the people were screaming and yelling at people on the ship, and all of us on the shore were saying, they're goners. They don't have a chance. And I was the most negative of everybody. But then Jesus Christ walked through the crowd and walked right out on the sea, calmed the waves, calmed the people down, and turned around, and he came back towards the shore, but there was a shallow part, and when he was nearing that, some force tried to pull him under, and it succeeded, it seemed, and we were all going, oh no, even the adversary can affect the Savior himself. But he just came right back up, and he had won the struggle. And he came to shore, and he said, now I want you to follow me, and I'll show you what I can do. Remember this part of this story, though. I went to bed that night feeling like everything was hopeless. I was being sued by clients unfairly. None of my clients were doing what they should do, and I was just discouraged. That night I came home, Mom said, how did your day go? I said, it was terrible. Everything went wrong, nothing's possible. It's a mess. And that's the way I went to bed, with that attitude. But I had that dream, so we followed Christ. That's where I was. He said, follow me. And he went down this long, dusty road, and he healed the sick, brought sight to the blind, opened deaf people's ears, they could hear. He raised the dead. All of those things happened as he walked along. And then we came to a mountain that was just looked impossible to climb. And all the time I'd been saying, this is impossible. The people on the boat, I said, it's impossible. They can't be saved. And then when he was pulled under, it's impossible. I was a real naysayer, and we got to this mountain, and he said, let's climb this mountain to the very top, and I'll show you the whole world from up there. And I said, that's impossible. There's no way we can climb this mountain. And he just put his hand out and said, take my hand. And somebody took his hand, and one after another, I brought up the rear. I was the big naysayer saying, we can't do this. And holding hands like that, we just went up there like it was nothing. And we made it clear to the top. And I know the world is round, but we could see the whole world from the top. He said, look at this. This is the whole world. And I can't explain how we saw it all, but we saw everything. And then he said, how did he put it? He said, the fact that you can be here with me and see what I see, I can see everything. And he said, just remember that. And so I made up my mind to remember and quit saying it's impossible. But the very next thing that happened, I was in an airplane. It was still part of that dream, but I was in a huge airplane. It was a passenger plane of some sort, but bigger than any one I'd ever been in. It seemed like 50 yards wide from one side to the other. And I had, it must have been first class because I had all the room in the world and a recliner. And I was just comfy and enjoying it. But then we hit real rough area, and there was a lot of turbulence. I'd never seen anything like it except on my actual flight to my mission from New York to Panama. We went through some turbulence. It was just about this bad. It was so bad the plane was just rocking, and pieces of the ceiling were falling off, and so people were screaming and yelling, and I was the worst. I was saying, we're going to go down. This is impossible. And we can't survive this. And I glanced toward the back of the plane at that point, and I saw, of all people, Mary, the mother of Jesus. And she was up on a kind of on a raised platform, and she was just calm as could be. And she didn't say, "Come here," but she beckoned to me somehow, kind of like that. And she smiled, and I thought, I don't know if I can walk over there. The plane was still, but I made it over to her, and she called me LaRue. She said, "LaRue, you seem to be unusually troubled." I said, "Well, you're very perceptive, because I am." I said, "This is just the worst possible situation for us." She said, "I want you to do something for me." And she pointed to the other side of the plane, which was still quite a ways away from me. It was such a huge plane. And there was a staircase going downstairs. She said, "Go over there, go down those stairs, and you'll see what my son can do." And I'm thinking, I've already seen a lot of what he can do, but how's he going to save us from this? And so I went down there, and there was a room more square than this room, probably 20 feet each way. And there was some kind of engine diagonally from one corner of the room to the other going up. And there was 1,000 moving parts. And I was given to understand that was what was propelling this plane. And all of a sudden, it fell apart. All those parts fell to the floor. Just the floor was covered with all those parts. And I thought, oh no, now we are in trouble. We're going down for sure. And then suddenly I was aware that Jesus Christ was standing next to me, but either he's very tall, or in my dream at least he was seemingly 6 inches to a foot taller. He may have been on something, a little platform. But he looked at me and smiled, and he said, "LaRue, you're really troubled, aren't you?" And I said, "I guess I must seem to be." And he said, "Why are you so troubled?" I said, "Well, everything seems impossible to me. I'm having lots of trouble at work and all kinds of things." And he said, and I said, "And now this engine has totally fallen apart." And he said, "Oh, watch what I can do." And he just went like that, and it just reconstructed.
Just with a swoop of his hand.
Yeah, and it was fixed. And Then he gave me a hug and a smile again, and he pointed up the stairs, and I went up the stairs, walked past Mary, and she was grinning and as if to say, I told you so. And I went over, and that was the end of the dream. I sat down, everything was fine. And so about that time, this lasted all night long, because I went to bed and immediately fell asleep, which surprised me. And I immediately went into that dream and saw him at the Dead Sea and all. And I didn't wake up until morning. Mom was showering, getting ready to go teach school. And she was in the shower, and I got up after her, and I walked in, and I said, guess what? She said, what? Because I'd gone to bed grumpy as a bear, saying everything's impossible. I said, nothing's impossible to Christ. He can do anything. And she said, boy, are you the same guy I went to bed with last night? And that was kind of the end of it. She wanted to know, and I told her a shortened version of the dream. And it was really amazing.
And what happened to those lawsuits?
They prevailed or they continued. The people suing us were suing me, the church, corporation of the president. They were suing the state of Arizona and their own parents and two of his siblings. And it lasted for, let's see, 6 or 7 years. And it went through the Navajo County Superior Court, and then it went to the Arizona Court of Appeals, and then it went to the Arizona Supreme Court, and we won at every level. They said this is a frivolous lawsuit, and they ordered the plaintiffs to pay the legal fees. But the church, which had been sued along with me separately, called me up, somebody from the church, and said, we are going to forgive the legal fees. And they knew I had liability coverage that was going to pay my attorneys. I had separate attorneys, but my malpractice insurance was going to pay all of my fees. But the court had ordered my fees to be charged to the plaintiff, and they did the same in the lawsuit against the church. The church waived it and said, we'll forgive those fees. And so they called me and encouraged me to. I didn't want to. I was kind of hesitant to do it, but I finally agreed. And so they didn't have to pay those fees. And it was a lot of money, $250,000. And I wanted them to pay. But
For all the stress they caused you.
yeah, I think that's where my heart trouble started. But that's that story.
Yeah, I could see that causing some heart problems.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, it did.
Because our boys like to wake up at 6 o'clock when the sun comes up.
Yeah, that's the way Daisy is.
All right.
She'll even be up before 6.
Love y'all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Love ya.
Good night.